Awesome. Well, let me get my screen shared here real quick, and then we'll just dive right into it. All right. Can everybody see my title slide all right?
Looks good.
Yes.
All right. Perfect. So this is my title slide. This is the only slide you're going to see tonight. I'm Stephen. I'm a senior support engineer over at Chocolatey Software. I've been doing PowerShell for just a couple of years now, 3 or 4. But I kind of got bit by the bug as soon as I started playing with it, and I have been doing PowerShell ever since, automating as much as I can get my hands onto. So I love this stuff. And then when I discovered Chocolatey, I was like, wow, this is really freaking cool. And it's built on PowerShell under the covers. So that's even cooler. That's a win. And then a little while later, I was like, hey, they're looking for help. So I reached out, had an interview, and I landed there. And it's been awesome. Super, super awesome place to work. We write a lot of cool things, do a lot of cool things. Get to interact with the community quite a bit. So it's been a really cool gig. But link to my GitHub's on here, github.com/StevieCoaster. And Stevie Coaster is how you can find me across all social media, namely Twitter. That's where I'm most active. So with that, let's dive right in. We are done with slides. So tonight we're going to be talking about Chocolatey. But before we start talking about Chocolatey, I want to take a second to just talk briefly about software automation in general. It's kind of a thing nowadays. There's different tools to do it different ways. Chocolatey is one of them. SCCM has their own way of doing things. Where Chocolatey and SCCM differ is Chocolatey is a package manager. So when I say package manager, people that have been traditionally Linux folks in that side of the world, they think apt, yum, that sort of thing. Chocolatey fills that gap for Windows. So instead of apt-get install something, you can choco install something. And then similarly with apt or yum, you can also uninstall and upgrade those software applications with Chocolatey. The way the Chocolatey handles things and the way that it's built on PowerShell means that a Chocolatey package doesn't necessarily have to be software installation either. So since it's just PowerShell under the hood, if there's a particular bit of code that you need to write or some files that you need to lift and shift somewhere, you can absolutely bundle those into a Chocolatey package, write some PowerShell to put those files where they need to go onto the file system, or similarly call out to a file share if you need to pull those files locally onto the file system. And then Chocolatey will track and manage that package over time. And later on, if you say have to uninstall that package, the uninstall logic for that package that perhaps put those files onto the system would remove those files from the system, for example. Or if you did some sort of version control thing where you had a new set of those files that needed to be put onto the system, you could bundle those up, bump the version of that package, and then say Choco upgrade that particular package, and it would copy those new files over top of the old ones. And it would reflect that when you do a Choco list local only, for example, to see all of the different applications or packages, rather, that Chocolatey is managing on that system. So that's kind of what Chocolatey is, what it does. We're not the only ones doing this anymore. Some of you might have seen Microsoft build. Microsoft announced Microsoft Winget, their package manager that they're starting to develop. Currently, it's a glorified application installer that has a very limited set of features. Currently, you can only uninstall or currently install with it, and that's it. The way Chocolatey got started was we wanted a true package manager that did everything: install, upgrade, uninstall, and we've slowly added more features to that over time. We've only been commercialized for about 3 years now. It started to add business-only features that are paid features. Chocolatey in and of itself is an open source project, has been since the beginning and always will be. But from a business sense, there are advantages, let's say, to using Chocolatey as your automation platform for doing software management across your Windows fleet. So with all that said, let's take a quick look at what a Chocolatey package actually is. What does it look like to create a Chocolatey package? So to do that, we'll open an administrative shell, and I'm just going to real quickly go back to my C drive as soon as my Bluetooth keyboard wakes up. I'm going to do an ls here, and I'm going to cd into my packages directory. Clear my screen, and let me look. What all do I have in here? I have a green shot and I have a Google Chrome. I don't particularly care to use either one of those just yet fully, but we'll pick on Google Chrome just to kind of give you an example of what this looks like from an open source perspective. How would I, as an end user, create a package to then consume somewhere else? So that's the choco new command, and you give it a package name. We'll call it Google Chrome. What this is going to do is generate all of the template files that you need to start creating that package. So if I open this folder up, you'll see that I've got now a folder called Google Chrome that Chocolatey's generated for me. And I've got a couple of things in here. I've got a new spec file, a README, and a to-do. The to-do file just has a list of things that you need to edit to make this a fully working package. Since I know what I'm doing, I'm going to just go ahead and delete that file because I don't need it. And similarly, the readme.md is placed there to give you a little bit more explanation, and also to fill it out if you want to put it in some kind of source control, which we absolutely recommend, storing your packaging files themselves in source control. That way you can version those files the same way that you would anything else that you write, since a Chocolatey package under the hood is just code. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that README file as well. The new spec file is all of the metadata that explains and describes the package that you're about to create. Chocolatey is built on top of NuGet. So at the end of creating a package, you get what we lovingly call a nupkeg, or a new package, that you're then able to store in some sort of repository server and then consume on other Windows machines in your environment. So this is the new spec file. It's an XML file. If you've played with NuGet packages before, or any kind of XML, you've probably seen this, or at least a version of this. So in here, I'm not going to really edit anything. I just kind of want to show this off. You'll notice that we have a lot of comments in here. We try to be very, very verbose with our comments, explaining every little thing that's important inside of this stuff. So we've got our ID, our package ID. That's what you will call from the command line when you're installing a Chocolatey package. So choco install Google Chrome in this example. That's the ID of this package. Version, what version of Google Chrome does this package represent? I think this is like 68 or something like that on the system, or 80 something. I don't remember. But that's the version. And then if we scroll down a little bit farther, there's some other things that you would fill out if you are going to, say, publish this to the community repository, for example. You will put your package source URL, or your GitHub. Where on GitHub do you store these source files? If you've been doing Git for a while, that's easy. GitHub.com/your name/whatever, whatever repo you this stuff into. Owners, that's you. That can either be your real name or your GitHub username, for example. 98% of people use their GitHub username as their owner in their new spec file when you look on the community repository. Title, friendly name for the package that you're creating. Typically, when we do a software type package, we put install in parentheses. Project URL, similar to the package source URL. But this is actually the link to information about the binary that this package is installing. Icon URL, if you have one, if it's available, you can grab the icon off of the executable, save that into your GitHub repository URL, and then put a link to your GitHub repository URL where that icon is right here in that icon URL field. And then there's just some other various metadata in here. This section is really important and really cool. So Chocolatey, because it's built on NuGet, we have the concept of dependencies. So if the application that you're installing, say, for example, Google Chrome here, required for whatever reason a certain version of .NET to work, you could declare a dependency on that .NET package. And then you could also do, well, I need it to be at least this version, or at most this version, or range in between. So you can limit your versioning as well inside of your dependencies, and you can take as many of those as you need. And Chocolatey will fulfill all of those dependencies first before it installs Google Chrome in this example. And if those dependencies, they themselves have dependencies, it will walk back and resolve those dependencies first as well. So there's a complete tree. That way you can know that without a doubt, when you install this package, it's going to put onto the system everything it needs to make sure that that installation is successful. And again, here's a file section. By default, we grab everything in the tools directory and put it into the nupkeg. If you have other things that you want to put outside of the tools folder, maybe you have a files folder or you have a documents folder or something like that, you can absolutely call those out here as well. And they will be bundled up into that nupkeg when you pack this package. So that is the new spec file of a Chocolatey package. Next, we go into the tools folder. We have a couple of text files here, license and verification. That's strictly for the community repositories feed. If you were to publish packages to the community repository, we require you to have a license and a verification.txt file in there. Not really going to go over them too much in detail here. They're not really that interesting. So we're left with a couple of PowerShell files by default, and they're pretty self-explanatory in what they do. Chocolatey install.ps1 contains all the logic for installing an application or a package, whatever your package is going to do. Chocolatey uninstall.ps1 contains all of the logic for removing that package when you say choco uninstall it. And then Chocolatey before modify runs before install and upgrade commands. When you're installing an application or upgrading an application to do any work that's necessary before that package does its real work. For example, you might have an application that needs to stop a process or stop a service before it runs the upgrade of its installation. Greenshot is a good example of that. It's got a systray thing that runs all the time. So in your Chocolatey before modify.ps1, you would say stop process, whatever, or stop service, whatever. Or you could potentially have to back up some files, or any number of things like that can go into that Chocolatey before modify.ps1. That way, when you install or upgrade that application, you can be sure that the right things are done before that piece of software is upgraded or whatever else that package is going to be doing, that work is done. Cool thing about Chocolatey, and especially in the business version, if you're installing an application with Chocolatey, say Google Chrome, for example, you don't need a Chocolatey uninstall.ps1 file. By default, Chocolatey takes a snapshot of the registry before we lay down the application and after, and we grab those changes and we capture that uninstall string that we laid down. And Chocolatey knows how to form that uninstall string automatically when you call a choco uninstall, such that Google Chrome gets removed or Firefox gets removed or whatever. So really, the Chocolatey uninstall.ps1 file is used to clean up anything extra that might be left over, or maybe some work needs to be done before you actually remove the application from the system. Things like that. That's what the Chocolatey uninstall.ps1 file is for. But if you're just installing an application, Chocolatey will uninstall it for you, no problem. There are some cases where an application doesn't really write good information to the registry and we don't get a good uninstall string out of it, and we'll fail to uninstall that package. At that point, you'll know that you need some sort of uninstall script. Now, when you submit a package to the community repository, that gets checked. We have a system of checks and balances that every single version of every single package, and there's like 8,000 packages out there now, goes through a verification process where we check the package for quality and consistency. If there's a binary inside the package or a URL to a binary inside the package, we pre-download that binary and ship it off to VirusTotal and make sure against 60 or 70 antivirus scanners that that binary is in fact safe and ready for consumption by the global population. And then we also install that package on a box and uninstall that package on a box and check and make sure that Chocolatey actually does what it's supposed to do, so that you can have pretty much 100% certainty when that version of that package goes through that process, and then the final human moderator who reads over all the code and makes sure nothing nefarious got stuck in there by somebody. Once that process is complete, a moderator says, I approve, everything's good. It shows up on the community repository. You can Choco install it or Choco upgrade to that new version. When you're doing it in a business environment on your own, you don't have that verifier service running. So that's something that when you're building your packages, you'll have to test that stuff on your own. So it is a little bit of trial and error when you're building packages to make sure that A, it installs, and B, it uninstalls. Typically when you see it uninstalling, we tell you more or less why, and 9 times out of 10 it's because the registry sucked and we couldn't actually uninstall it, so you'll need to use the Chocolatey uninstall.ps1 to do that work. Now, I'm going to pause for just 2 seconds because I covered a lot of stuff right there. Does anybody have questions about Chocolatey packages, what they are, how they work, things like that, or are we good for me to just keep moving on?
I'm looking at the website, and it looks like there's multiple versions of it. Some are pay, some are
yeah.
I mean, is there like a free one for personal use, or?
Yeah, so Chocolatey itself is open source. You can go out to chocolatey.org/install and say individual and install Chocolatey right from there and begin to use it. Absolutely.
Okay.
Somebody's thing.
Yeah.
What are the steps that you need to go through to install the framework in the first place?
So it's a single line of PowerShell to make it work, and that PowerShell is available right on our website for you to use. But it's more or less set execution policy bypass. We scope it to the process, and let me just type that better, process, and we force it, and then we just do an invoke expression, and I'm going to be lazy here. And then it's new object, system.net.web client, and we download a string, and we say https chocolatey.org/install.ps1. That's it. And if I run this, boom, it's going to get the latest version of Chocolatey.
You've
It's
done
already
that?
on. Yeah, I've done it once or twice. But that's all there is to it. Now, this isn't really going to break anything on my system by reinstalling Chocolatey in here. If we go to see program data, Chocolatey, lib, you'll notice that all my stuff is still in here. So all I did was just re-put the Choco bits over top of themselves when I ran that. No harm, no foul. And if I just run this again, just to verify I'm still licensed, ta-da, I'm still licensed. So no harm, no foul. But that's how you install Chocolatey. Now we are working to create an MSI because we have had a lot of people be like, I just want an installer. Can you give me an installer? Well, Chocolatey is not. Chocolatey is a package manager, so we wanted it to just be run a single line of PowerShell, and you can have Chocolatey on your system, because you can bolt that single line of PowerShell into any kind of automation tool you want. We're agnostic in terms of you can run it in Chef, you can run it in Puppet, you can run it in Ansible, you can run it in SaltStack, you can run it via SCCM, PDQ deploy, Landesk, Avanti, Altiris, BigFix, whatever. If it can execute PowerShell code or a batch file, you can get Chocolatey onto the system. You can use Chocolatey in your environment across any version of Windows, whether it be on-prem or in the cloud. We're super backwards compatible all the way to PowerShell v2 for reasons that I don't like, because Microsoft decided to put Windows 7 support in Azure for a little while longer. We were all excited to drop v2 support, and then Microsoft did that, and now we have to keep it around for a while. So, but that's how you get Chocolatey. But yeah, there are a couple different versions. So there's open source version, and then the pro version gives you a few more features. The pro version is really for somebody who likes what we do and just wants to support us. Pro is a way you can do that. It's like $100 a year, and you can use it on up to 8 machines that you own. So, and then there's the Chocolatey for Business license. We have some grandfathered architect licenses out there, but we're not actively selling those anymore. Those are strictly for people that just want to build packages and then consume them with Choco elsewhere, like big MSPs and things like that. We have MSP licensing as well, but that's going away. Just straight up Chocolatey for Business. That's the only license type we're going to have moving forward. And that license gives you all of the features of Chocolatey. And we're going to talk about some of those features right now, actually. So we've kind of seen what it's like to manually build a package with Chocolatey by running that Choco new command and generating this Google Chrome package. And I've walked you through kind of what the PowerShell looks like and what the new spec looks like and all of that stuff. But where the power of Chocolatey for Business comes into play is you can actually just grab that executable or that MSI, right click on it, and say create Chocolatey package or create Chocolatey package without GUI. So we'll do it with the GUI first. And what that's going to do is open up this nice GUI window that automatically fills in the binary into the location. And if you've got both a 32 and a 64-bit version, you can specify both of those, and we'll detect the bitness at install time and install the right version for you. Output directory, where do you want the nupkeg to be stored when we're done, basically is what that means. Additional silent arguments, we're automatically going to figure out what the silent arguments are for you so that when we're done, you have a completely ready to go Chocolatey package. Additional options that you can specify here. And then this new spec information, here's that nice form that you can fill out. Instead of editing that XML directly, just fill the fields out here and we'll generate the XML from that. And then this tab is not specific to this, creating this Google Chrome package. This Programs and Features tab is for looking at a system, all the applications that are currently in Programs and Features, and running Choco Sync against it, which is another business feature that takes all of those all of those applications and Programs and Features and generates a Chocolatey package for each one of them. And then Chocolatey takes over the management of that application. Now, that's a really cool feature, but there's a bunch of caveats to it that I end up explaining to people all the time because of the way that the community maintainers have named their packages on the community repository versus what we name them via sync. It's not always easy to just say sync all the packages and then they're just going to work with a community repository, so later you can Choco upgrade all and everything lines up and it just works. There's a little bit of additional work you have to do there to make sure that those names line up, especially for the ones you really care about, like Google Chrome, Adobe Reader, Firefox, things like that. But I'm not going to do anything here. I'm just going to hit generate package and let Chocolatey do its thing. And in about 5 seconds or so, it's going to say it's completed. And I'm going to look in this folder and you can see that I've got my Google Chrome nupkeg here. That's the completed Chocolatey package. And this Google Chrome folder is the files that we wrote for you and generated that package from. So if we look in here, you'll see that we've got our new spec file. And if we edit that file, you can see that we've pulled in the IDE, we've called it Google Chrome, we've got its version, we know that Google wrote it, we know it's Google's the ones that authored it, we gave it some tags, here's a description, we pulled out all of the MSI properties off of the MSI and stuck them into the new spec file for you. We've also stuck them into the install script that we'll see in a second. So that's the new spec file. And also, if you have a new spec file and you quickly want to just generate a Chocolatey package, you can right click on it and say compile Chocolatey package, and it'll put the nupkeg right beside the new spec file in that case when you want to do that. So if we look here, there's that nupkeg, instead of running the choco pack command, which is what would create the package against the new spec file from the command line. If we look in our tools directory, you'll notice we've got the binary sitting right beside the install script, and we've written the PowerShell code for you to install this application. So if you look at the PowerShell code in here, you'll see that we've got a tools directory, which is just the path on disk to this tools folder. And then we've called out that we want that tools directory and the MSI is going to be our file location. And then we've built a hash table of items that we need to pass to this helper function called Chocolatey install package. And you'll notice we've got our software name is in here. We've got our file is the file location we defined above. It's an MSI. Here's the silent args for that MSI. Here's the valid exit codes that we expect. Here's the checksum that we automatically checksum that binary. That way, when you install it on another system, Chocolatey is going to checksum that file and ensure that the binary that it's attempting to install matches what is in the package or what the package expects. And then again, here's those MSI properties that we pulled out as part of the process. So if you wanted to down the road, say, and do this for all users, you could come in here and say copy, bring this up here, come in here, save it, and then regenerate your package. Oops, I hit a button somewhere. So you would come out here and double click this file, for example, and it would generate that package again for you. Right, like that. So that's package builder in a nutshell, and it works with MSIs and executables both. We don't discriminate between the two. So if you want to do an exe, for example. I'm just going to create it without the GUI this time. So you can right click on that file, say create Chocolatey package without GUI. Chocolatey GUI is going, or Chocolatey for Biz is going to load up. It's going to create that green shot folder. And in this case, it's going to stick the nubcag right beside the new spec file. So that's a completely ready to go package. If we look at the Chocolatey install.ps1 file, you'll notice that we were able to figure out the silent install arguments for GreenShot as well. We've automatically written that PowerShell code for you so that you're then able to store this package in a repository and consume it on other Windows systems.
So quick question. If you were going to do a massive install, say to 30 machines or something, is there a way of logging the machine, logging the install, successful on this one, not successful on this one?
Yes, there is. And that is a brand new feature, actually. So one of the other things that Chocolatey for Business brings to the table is our central management platform.
Nice.
So if I can remember what the password is. So we've got a dashboard here and I've got a computer. And actually, before I do that, I am going to steal a block of code here. Let me go client installation. So I'm going to grab that, come over here. And actually, I think I already have this here. Yeah, I'm going to run that. I'm going to make this computer talk to this computer and do a check-in so it shows up in this list at some point. But this is central management. This is central management's been around about a year and a half or so. And up until this point, the latest release, it's just been a reporting platform. So there's been this software and this reports tab inside of here. So you can have, and there's an agent that runs on each machine, and it every half hour by default does a Choco list and a Choco outdated and reports that information into central management. So that if I were to go in here and click on Choco server, for example, this server here, we get a listing of all of those packages that are currently installed on this system. So if I look, I've got 35 or so packages installed on this system. And according to its sources, all of them are up to date. So if we look at the software, for example, we can see all of the software that's installed across all of the machines. And if we were to dig in here, and if I had 100 machines and 30 of them had .NET 4.5.2 of them on it, all of those machines would show up in here. Now, the cool thing about the latest version, this 0.30 release of central management, is the concept of groups and deployments. So deployments exist in two flavors. And if we do a new deployment here, we can give it a friendly name, and let's just call it Denver PSCG. And we can add steps. Now, you'll notice that we have two different kinds of steps. We have a basic step, which allows you to select what Choco command you want to run. So Choco install, upgrade, uninstall. I can say Choco install, we'll say Firefox. Can select my target group. I don't have any target groups currently. So what I'm going to do is save this, go back and create a group real quick. And I'm just going to call it Denver. I'm going to say, oh, do I not have this one opted in for deployments? I probably don't. Chocolatey central management. I think I spelled that right. I sure hope so. All right, and restart service. give me a second for that to come back here. And let me go, let me look and see. Yeah, that other one hasn't come in yet. Did I spell something wrong? Chocolatey Central. Why did that not work? Oh, because I have the wrong version of the extension on there. Well, whatever. We'll go in here. We'll say create a group. Say Choco server because it'll be good for now. We'll call it Denver. We'll say save. Then we'll go back to our deployment. And I started that one, so it's going to be in drafts still. So I'll just edit that deployment. We'll call it add a step. This is going to be install Firefox. We'll give it a basic command, Choco install. We'll call it Firefox, and we'll select our group of Denver. We'll hit save. We'll save that guy. And now we have a deployment that's got just one step in it. So I can move that down to ready, which stages it for later. At the minute, we don't have any sort of schedules built in, but that's coming in the next version of central management. We just wanted to get deployments out the door so that we could get customers using it, get some bug reports in, things like that, and fix those while we're adding the next bit of features. If I were to go in here and say, edit this and maybe add a step, you'll notice that I've got this advanced step here. I can define and write whatever PowerShell code I want here. And that will get shipped to the agent, and the agent will execute that PowerShell code. So deployments are more of an orchestration tool than just adding Chocolatey packages to a machine. The demo that we use in our webinars and things like that is taking down a database server and upgrading the database via a Chocolatey package, but taking a IIS farm offline via some PowerShell code in a step, and then in another step upgrading the website via a Chocolatey package on those web servers, and then a final package that brings everything back online. That's the deployment. So
Wow.
They can be basic, just here's some Choco commands that you can run, or they can be advanced, here's whatever PowerShell code you want. Execute those, and each step can execute against different targets for the overall deployment. So for example, in step one, I installed Firefox on Choco server, but if I went over to target groups and I had another group of machines that I wanted to run this step on, I could just select that group and it would only execute on those ones. And then if I wanted to later as well, I could come down here to the advanced filters and I could say fail the overall deployment if the step itself isn't successful, or I could uncheck that and say only run other deployment steps if this step succeeds, or I could do both of them. And we've also got, here's the ability to control those valid exit codes, and here's an execution timeout, defaults to 4 hours. And we've got a couple of script tips here on how to capture exit codes and things like that to pass it back to the deployment to let the deployment know that it was all good. So we'll cancel back out of that. And if we go back to our deployments, you'll notice that since I didn't actually edit anything. So if I were to edit this and like change the name of this to Denver and hit save, if I go back to my deployments, it's no longer ready. It moved it back to draft because I made a change. So I'm going to move it all the way to ready. And then I'm going to go ahead and click this run now button. And what that run now button is going to do is it's going to drop it down into active. And I can click on the details of that and see that I've got one active step in here. And if I drill into that, we can see that it's currently waiting to do this action. Deployments, the agent checks for a deployment every 3 minutes. So in the next version, there's going to be scheduling come into this pane here so that you can get a deployment all ready to go and just say schedule it to happen Friday after hours or Thursday after hours, whatever. The next thing that's going to come as well is if we look at this software and we notice that, well, Chocolatey license extension is outdated. If I look at Chocolatey license extension, it's outdated on this Vagrant machine, this one over here that I just checked in. Maybe I want to upgrade it right from here. So there's going to be a button that allows you to just say, upgrade this package, and then all the machines that are in the list here will dynamically generate the group, and the deployment will just write all that for you. And it'll go out and it'll do it, and it'll report back in when it's done. And then all of those machines will have the latest version of the extension on them. But yes, to answer your question, there is a dashboard portal.
Nice, very impressive. Smaller footprint than SCCM too, I guess.
Little bit, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't. I built this box at 740, and it was done at 750. I had this ready to go.
Plan to have Active Directory integration for your groups and other functions?
So currently, we do have LDAP authentication. So you can tie users in Active Directory to roles in central management. We do plan to offer the ability to have groups be tied to an OU in Active Directory, but that takes a little bit more code to make that happen. So that's coming in a future release. Yeah, and there is an API behind this. Everything that you see here actually hits an API endpoint. And over the weekend, I wrote like 27 commandlets to do different things. So there is a PowerShell module coming that will let you interact with central management just via PowerShell.
So out of curiosity, since you're packaging up Chrome, browsers tend to be really auto update heavy or auto update happy. How do you guys handle that?
Is this going to work? No, because I didn't fix that particular aspect of this box. That is where Jenkins comes in, or any other pipeline tool that you want to use. We just ship Jenkins as part of this. I'm using this box that I'm on now as our quick deploy environment. So this is an appliance that you can run in Hyper-V or VMware that has a Nexus repository server on it already. It's got central management installed on it already, and it has Jenkins installed on it already. So all you have to do is boot it, put it on your network, and you're more or less ready to go. So let me just grab the credentials for Jenkins here and go in. And we'll kind of talk about one of the other cool features of Chocolatey for Business while we go through this. So we have Jenkins out of the box set up to do a couple of jobs. The first one is internalize packages from the community repository, and that is using our package internalizer feature. So by default, we don't really say to organizations, hey, here's the community repository. There's 8,000 packages on it. Have fun. One, you're going to get rate limited because you're going to hit our API way too often if you're doing that. And two, it's not really fully reliable, and there's a lot of distribution and copyright law around that. So we wrote package internalizer. And what package internalizer does is it looks at the community repository or an upstream repository, and it downloads that package to your system. And it does a couple of cool things along the way. So for example, if I were to say Choco download Firefox and give it the internalized flag here, what that's going to do, and I hope I have yeah, it does. So what that's going to do is go out to the community repository, find Firefox, and download that package. But the Firefox package inside of it, actually, this probably just reached out to my internal repository now that I think about it. Yeah, let me delete that and redo that again. Download that and get rid of that. Okay. And I'm going to make it go where I want it to go. Source HTTPS. Oop, that's wrong. There we go. Now it's going to do what I want. So you'll notice that it's saying it found internalizable Chocolatey functions. So it looked at that install.ps1 as part of that package and said, oh, there's a URL in here. I'm going to go to that URL and pre-download that binary as part of this process. And I'm going to rewrite the package to look to the package location instead of the community repository or wherever that download server happened to be on Firefox's servers. So that when you internalize that package and you look at this Firefox package, you'll notice it's 104 megs. And if we were to look at the Firefox package itself, go to the tools directory, here's that files folder. Here's 32-bit, here's 64-bit. It names them a little weird in this particular package. Some of them name it different than others depending on the URLs. But if we look at this PowerShell code, we wrote this PowerShell code for you, and the community maintainer has written a lot of helper functions and things like that that we've put in here for you already. We just rewrote everything to replace any URLs that you see, like for example, line 192. That's no longer a HTTPS URL. That's looking at that files folder for that Firefox setup. So that's what package internalizer does, and the Choco download command does. So you can set up Jenkins here on a schedule to say internalize packages from the community repository. Well, which ones? Say, for example, putty, because it's small, we can do that one. And I'm going to shove it into a test URL first. I don't want it to go directly to production. So I'm going to push it to a test URL. And I'm going to say build. And I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to say console output. And you'll notice that it's now doing the download of that putty package. And that's now done. Now, if I go back to the Jenkins folder and look at all of these other ones, you'll notice that I have two other jobs. I have update production repository and I have an update test repository. So I can run this one, say, once a month or whatever, when I want to add new production or new packages to my test repository. But then I can schedule this update test repository from Chocolatey community repository to say run once a day or twice a day or once a week or once every 2 weeks or however often I want it to run. And what it's going to do is for every package that's in the test repository, it's going to create an object out of that package. So you get a name and a version, and it's going to query the community repository for the latest version of that package, and it's going to compare the versions. And if the community repository is newer, it's going to go ahead and Choco download, internalize that package, and push it to your test repository. Now there's code in here that's commented out that allows you to then install that package and uninstall that package and do all of the testing. And then this job will kick off the update production repository job, which just says for every package that's in the test repository, do that same process that the test one does against the community. But instead of looking to the community repository, production looks to test. So if test has something newer than production and everything was good in the test run, it's going to download that package into the production repository. And then you're able to see those packages in your production repository. And then you're able to consume them against all your clients, either via a deployment here in central management, or if you're so inclined, you can give your end users Chocolatey GUI and give them something more user-friendly for them to be able to consume packages with. And I've got just a couple of simple things in this one. I built this repository. I've kind of got this one neutered a little bit. But if we look here, we've got some packages in here. But if we go over to this client machine, this machine is now running the agent. So if we were to run Chocolatey GUI, I've got the Chocolatey GUI agent. I'm going to turn this light on because it's getting dark. I've got Chocolatey GUI, and in the business version, we have what's called background mode. So this user doesn't have administrative rights to this machine. He's just Joe Schmo user. But I can come in here as Joe Schmo user and see all of these packages, and because of the way the NICs are on these VMs, some of these icons might load, some of them might not. But I can come in here to say, here's Firefox 74 and here's Firefox 68. One of these is the ESR and one of them isn't. That's why it's showing up twice here. But I can right click on this and say install, or I can double click on it. Don't make me a liar. There we go. And get all the details. And this is all the information that was in the new spec file of the package. We surface that into the GUI so we can see all of that nice information, and then give them an install button. And then Chocolatey on the back end is installing that application as the background service, so that that end user that doesn't have administrative rights can get this Firefox package. And by default, they're only allowed to install and upgrade applications. They can't take software off of the system. There is a way that there is a configuration item such that you can allow the uninstall command to be executed by the background agent, but set a configuration item that says only allow background uninstalls from user installs, so that if you as an admin put Firefox on the system, users can't take it off. But if a user put Firefox on the system, say they want to try the browser out, it's available, they find out a week later they don't like it, since they're the ones that installed it, they can uninstall it. And as you can see, we now have that Firefox browser is available. And Chocolatey, I should mention that Chocolatey GUI itself, as you see it here, is open source. If you run open source Choco and you just want a friendlier UI to install packages from the community repository and upgrade packages from the community repository, you can absolutely just Choco install a Chocolatey GUI. It'll put this on here and you can use it. But if you pay for Chocolatey and you're a business user, you can give your end users Chocolatey GUI, give them a nice interface to select software from, and then without administrative rights, give them the ability to install that software as well. And I feel like I've covered a whole lot more ground, so I'm going to pause for a second. And if there's any other questions, I've really covered at this point all of the stuff that I wanted to cover, as kind of a general overview of Chocolatey. So if there's any questions at all, happy to answer.
As someone that internalizes packages by hand, I'll just say that whole process is magic. That's really cool.
Yeah. So you're not beholden to Jenkins. I've done it with Adam Driscoll's Universal Automation, and I've done it with Azure DevOps. So if you're more familiar in one of those other tools, go for it. It's fine. As long as it can execute PowerShell and has Chocolatey available and is licensed, you're good to go. I ran just as a test to see, is it possible? I put an Azure DevOps build agent on a VM, just like one of these ones, and built my pipeline out so that the first stage of the pipeline did some work, and then the other stage of the pipeline ran on my local build agent and did a Choco download and pushed to an internal repository and things like that. So you can absolutely do things like that with Azure DevOps, and similar Universal Automation was really slick to do it with as well. And I'm just looking through a couple of things in chat. So Pro doesn't really give you any additional support levels. You do get, I think there's like 8 support cases or something like that a year, to where if you have a problem, you can put a ticket in and you get access to me. But we limit the number of cases that you can have as a Pro user. Here's another question. The question here in chat is, does Chocolatey have an option to be downloaded to the end system before the deployment time, like SCCM? So the short answer is yes. The long answer is yes, but it takes some work. And what I mean by that is, if we look at the Chocolatey install script that ships as part of QDE, or a quick deploy environment here, which is built off of the actual install script for the open source version, we have a couple of things that you fill out. So you give it the repository where your Chocolatey package lives. By default, if you were to use the open source, this would point to the community repository, and that's how it gets it. But in this sense, it's pointing to my repository server. Similarly, you've got credentials. So if you want to lock down your repository server, don't give it anonymous access, that sort of thing, you can create an account, put the account credentials in here, and we'll use that. But if we scroll down just a little bit and we get to this local Chocolatey package file path equals join path environment temp chocolatey.nupkeg. That's important, because if we get all the way down to the very, very bottom of this and we do this, we're saying if we don't have a local Chocolatey nupkeg, go ahead and download the nupkeg from whatever repository server is at the very top of this file, and then install Chocolatey from package. We have this helper function here, and then wherever that is. So the long answer to the yes is just this. Instead of downloading the file, you can set this to be wherever you're going to pre-stage that nupkeg to, and then just call this whenever you're ready to install it, and we'll pick it up from that file system location and install Chocolatey. So yes, you can absolutely download it to the in system before the deployment time if you so choose. And I think that's it from the chat. Is there anything else from any of the folks on the call here?
I want to beat that that update drum one more time.
Okay.
So suppose Chrome updates itself beyond what you have on the on your management server there. Is there a way to lock it in and say, like, yeah, you're not going to auto update until I push it out, or some other way to resolve that so you don't have that drift?
So there's a couple of ways to do it. If you download and install the packages from the community repository, I know Firefox does it for sure, and I'm 98% sure that the Google Chrome package neuters the auto update functionality, or at least has the ability to pass in a parameter to say, don't allow the auto update functionality to happen when you install Chrome. That way it can't auto update. And similarly, if you say, if we look at, what do I have on this system? C, oh, my keyboard just shut off. C list, local only. Let's look and see what I have. So I have Firefox 76.0.1. Let's save that. We have what's called the Choco pin command. So if we look at that, and we run the help, because I always forget the syntax of pin. It's pretty simple, but yeah. So add name and version. Choco pin, add name, Firefox version is going to be that. And in the business version, we can add a reason, and that's going to be equal. That's not going to work because I can't type. What is the reason? Do I not need equals there? Blah. You can tell how often I use the reason parameter, right? Whatever, I'm just going to leave it off. I know it works, but what did I do wrong now? Name, Firefox, version.
Does it need an equal between the parameter and the value?
Yes, it does, because I'm dumb. And I can't type. There we go. Yeah, I think that's better now. Oh, whatever. I'm just going to longhand it. The whole thing. Name equals Firefox. Value equals. Oh, I don't understand why pin is not working, because that's exactly what it's supposed to do. Did I break it? I think I broke it. Oh, that's why. Very picky. Helps if I spell version right too. Hey, look at that. So what I just did when I pinned this, when later I do like Choco upgrade all, it will skip Firefox if there's a later version because I've pinned it to this specific one. So that's a way to negate it as well.
Okay, so you got to kind of
if you're upgrading other things and you just do Choco upgrade all to do it all one fell swoop, it'll update every single package if there's an upgrade available for that package. You can pin them to specific versions. That way they get skipped.
Okay, so you kind of have to neuter the software's auto update needs to be turned off, but then you can also control it through Choco, kind of hit it from both sides is what you got to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And if it ever gets to a point where one of them happens to get ahead somehow, say there's somebody creates a Google Chrome package and forgets to neuter auto update or something like that, and it gets deployed out accidentally, and now you've got a version of Google Chrome that all of a sudden you're like 2 versions ahead. If you say Choco install Google Chrome from your repository and pass -- allow downgrade, it will bring Chrome back down to the version that's the latest version available on your repository.
Oh, okay. That could be handy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's also really trivial if you've got existing software on a system. We'll pick on Google Chrome again. So say you've installed Google Chrome, it's in programs and features, but all of a sudden you're managing that system now with Chocolatey. If you say Choco install Google Chrome, the Google Chrome installer will just run and reinstall Chrome at whatever version the package has, because Chocolatey is not managing that package at that exact minute. So that installer is going to take over whatever is in programs and features currently. And then after it's done, Chocolatey will be managing Google Chrome at whatever version that package happened to be. So it'll kind of take over in a almost brute force fashion for software that's currently on the box. Some software installers work better than others in that regard. Sometimes the installer's like, hold up, wait a second, I'm already installed. What the heck are you thinking? And it won't let the install happen. So in those cases, you'll have to do some work. But in cases where developers actually give a damn and do things right, it just magically reinstalls itself and everything's hunky-dory.
Well, we all know the history of developers giving a damn on Windows.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So this management server, does it need a VM to run, or can it run in an app service?
It does need a VM to run. So it's built on an AD framework and ASP.NET Core. But at the minute, we only have the SQL Server provider coded for. So you do need a version of SQL Server to house the central management database. Now, I've got just SQL Server Express running on this machine, and that's fine for up to, I'm going to say, 1,000 or so machines. You won't run into really any problems for running central management on SQL Express at that point. That said, SQL Server is better to run things on because you get database availability groups and backups and all the cool stuff that when you pay for SQL, you get all those cool features. But I know SQL is expensive. So if you're just kicking the tires on it or you're a really small shop, SQL Express is just fine. And then it's running in IIS as well. But yeah, if you're a small shop, you can get away, just like I am here. The database and the web server and the service are all running on the same machine happily. It's fine. If you're going to scale up past, say, 500 machines, I would separate the service out to its own VM. And if you've got the real estate and the hardware and the disk space and it's not a big deal, it is best practice to isolate those roles so that the database is its own thing IaaS is its own thing. Maybe the service is its own thing. Maybe you've got an app server that doesn't have a super heavy load that you could put the service on, or it's okay to put the service on the IIS box. You could do that. So it is Microsoft best practice to separate those roles out, but you can absolutely, if you're a small shop, run it on one. And can that scale between sites to reduce WAN bandwidth? So yes, you can absolutely run an instance of the management service in different sites if you want to, as long as that service is configured to talk back to, excuse me, the database server. So you can happily have agents checking into a management service that's perhaps in a different country than your database, and then the service will just send that information to the database. It's really small chunks of JSON data. It doesn't take very much bandwidth at all to ship that stuff over. So yes, you absolutely could scale that out. Doesn't look like there's any other questions coming through the chat. So
Yeah, I think we've gone quiet.
yeah.
All right. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys letting me take an hour or so of your time to talk about Chocolatey. I could talk about PowerShell and this sort of thing for much, much longer, but I don't want to run you guys too late.
Definitely appreciate you taking an hour of your time to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Stephen.
Absolutely. I love doing this stuff.
I'm going to have to play around with this internally a little bit and see if I can, I don't know, maybe get some internal traction for it.
Yeah, we get a lot of people that kick the tires on it, and we're happy to let you do that. If you want to reach out, we'll give you a couple weeks to play around with it. And this environment, like I've got built here, really lets you get more out of your trial than previously, because previously you were, building that repository server yourself, building Jenkins yourself, getting central management stood up yourself, that sort of thing. But right around the time that this whole COVID thing happened and people started working from home, we were like, we've got to do something to let companies get software to their end users better when they're not in the office. So I came up with the idea for this, and this is my baby. I built this quick deployed environment to let you guys just import it into your infrastructure, turn it on, follow a couple of instructions, and then start deploying it to clients. It's really maybe 2 hours to get fully up and running with it. It's pretty quick. And because it's just Chocolatey pointing at a repository server, you don't need a VPN to use this solution, or even a VPN to use the central management aspect. It's all HTTPS backed by certificates. And in the latest version of central management that's got the deployments aspect, there is a client salt and a server salt that you can apply to your configuration as well. That way, if you do open up the ability to have machines check in over the internet, you can also deploy to those machines over the internet from central management and not have to be connected to the corporate network at all, either via direct access or a VPN of some kind. It'll just use the internet.
I can see that being really handy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see a lot of customers that I've been on a lot of support calls lately with customers because they wanted me to just walk them through making sure they had all the boxes checked to make sure all of that worked the way they want it to. So in that scenario, we absolutely recommend putting some sort of authentication on your repository server and baking that credential into the setup script for your clients whenever you deploy to them. So, and that's really easy to do if you set up a PowerShell credential object and just reference that credential object in the scripts. You don't actually store the password in the scripts themselves. You're just passing it on the command line at runtime, and it just works.
You said everything's 443.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The management service by default runs on port 24020, and the central management website, the web UI here, actually runs on port 443. But you don't have to run the management service on port 24020 if you don't want to. You could run it on some other port if you wanted. Yeah, because the agent communication between the agent and central management is facilitated via that service, the central management service, and that runs a small WCF MVC process that listens on port 24020.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because COVID hit and all of our 30, 40 some odd offices cleared out. I don't think many people are going back to any of them anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we talked to a lot of people that are in that exact same boat.
Yeah.
That exact
I know
same
Intune
boat.
has been kicked around as an option for helping to manage some of that stuff, but
yeah, and we work with Intune really well.
Oh, does it integrate kind of nicely with that?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. That's always good.
Yeah. Did this actually ever finish? This should have finished. Yeah, finished. Looks good. Yay. Yeah, you get logging and everything in central management. Cool. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to stop my share. If there happens to be any other questions or anything, just let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.